We're not happy with that. We needed to change attitudes, we needed to change behaviours. So we have taken a tough line. Today with the team, we've drawn a line in the sand.
Hello and welcome to episode 42 of Radio Cricket. That's 42, the same number of deck chairs that are currently being rearranged on the Australian version of the Titanic. I'm Nishant Joshi, and I'd like to start off this edition of Radio Cricket by saying that I can bowl pretty handy leg spin, and I'd be willing to claim asylum in Australia at the drop of a hat. I spray it around a bit with the ball, but let's be honest, Aussies, beggars can't be choosers. I am joined tonight by a man who is as notorious for his wrong-uns as much as he is for his pathological obsession with puns. It is James Marsh.
Thanks very much, Nishant. You always put a positive spin on me in the introduction. So, anyway, but I have actually got a bone to pick with you, and I'd like to say you're rather lucky I'm still talking to you, because you still haven't sent me your self-assessment of how you think your performance in the last pod could have improved. You could have emailed me, texted me, slipped it under my hotel door, yet still I've got nothing. I expect you're going to claim that Shane Warne's mum's dog ate your homework, are you? But anyway, nevertheless, it is nice to talk to you. What have you been up to this week?
Well, James, I did slip something under your door, but obviously the memo saying to go easy on the puns in this week's episode probably didn't register with you. But yeah, it's been an interesting week in the world of cricket, and it's quite a coincidence actually, because it's just 3 years ago today that half the Pakistan side were banned by Ijaz Butt after a horrendous tour of Australia. You may remember the Akmal brothers were fined, Afridi was fined, Shoaib Malik was banned, Rana Naveed Ul Hassan was banned, Yunus Khan was banned, and the artist formerly known as Muhammad Yusuf was also banned. I believe he's now going by the name of Cat Stevens, but I'm not too sure on that one. It just made me long for those halcyon days of Pakistan cricket. You know, James, the days where you couldn't even go a week without seeing a Pakistan player wearing a white jacket with a wad of cash in the inside pocket, or a captain opening an ice cream parlour in London that he'd later use as a defence in a spot-fixing trial. Those really were the days, James. And now, even though Pakistan cricket may be settled under calmer waters, you can't argue that they're a lot less fun now that they have Misbah-ul Haq as captain, a man who seems like he'd complain that life in the old folks' home was too hectic for him. And in a tribute to the Pakistan team of a couple of years back, the Australians have rather cunningly paid homage in a real-life reenactment of how to destroy a cricket team in the most ridiculous way possible. This week, James Pattinson, Usman Khawaja, Mitchell Johnson and Shane Watson were axed from the squad for the third test at Mohali for a breach of team protocol. Now, upon hearing this news, the entire cricketing world automatically assumed that the four had gone on an all-night bender and turned up drunk to training, or were perhaps caught simulating fellatio whilst Michael Clarke was giving a team talk. Now, this all would have been less ridiculous than the actual reason given for being dropped, which was that the four players in question didn't complete an assignment handed to them by Mickey Arthur, in which he asked the whole squad to give feedback on their own performance to him, based on 3 points, namely how they could improve technically, mentally, and as a team. Now, James, I'm sure that as an England fan, you're utterly distraught by all this. So what do you make of this very sad and utterly hilarious state of affairs?
Well, in double Ashes year, Nishant, I mean, of course I am, but it's Kevin Peterson I feel sorry for. I mean, he must be terribly confused now. Now, apparently, you get axed from Test cricket for not texting information about the team. So it's a devastating blow for him. But coming back to Australia, I mean, let's face it, it's a country not unknown for crap soap operas, but this really has to take the biscuit. I thought Shane Warne suggesting that Glenn Maxwell should bat at number 3 in the Mohali Test was going to be the funniest thing I read about Aussie cricket this week, but apparently not. You've outlined, of course, what has happened, and obviously Mickey Arthur, to his credit, has fronted up today, and he said that this was a serious breach of team discipline, and actually it was a line in the sand moment. But, I mean, to me, the only way this could be a line in the sand would be if you went to your local beach, found a stick, and then wrote the word bollocks on the shore. And Michael Clarke, on his part, he said it's not good enough for the players not to have complied with those wishes, and quite frankly, is disrespectful to the coach. And he also said it's not just about one incident, and I guess we should believe him. There was the time that Khawaja used a misspelt hashtag during the first test, the time Watson sent an email with nothing in the subject line. I mean, these are serious indiscretions which Australia are right to clamp down on.
Well, yes, James, Michael Clarke, in fact, said that it was the culmination of a series of ill discipline within his side. And, I mean, it is completely unacceptable, as you did allude to. I mean, James Patterson, when he Instagrammed that picture without a caption, my heart really did sink. And to be honest, it's not the sort of thing that you'd seen in the heyday of McGrath and Gillespie. And to be honest, James, Australian fans must be thinking that things can't be getting much worse for them. And on the contrary, I suppose English fans must be thinking that things can't get any better for them. But, I mean, you think that Australian cricket's at its lowest ebb right now. You ain't seen nothing yet, James, because the bottom of this bottle ends in a Steve Smith-shaped catastrophe for the Australians. The word Schadenfreudegasm has never been so appropriate. And the thing is, James, that this Friday at Mohali, we are literally facing the prospect of Ravi Jadeja and Steve Smith lining up in Test cricket against each other. To be honest, it will be the pinnacle of sport. It will be the pinnacle of cricket, and it could be one of the highlights of any cricket fan's life. And we talk about great sporting rivalries. I mean, this could be a start of something absolutely epic. I mean, you talk about the greats. I mean, Borg and McEnroe in tennis, Tendulkar and McGrath, He-Man and Skeletor, Shane Warne's face and gravity. I mean, we could really be in for something special here, James.
Well, indeed. Well, you might say they're going to be the itchy and scratchy of cricket, but I suppose that would probably be Shoaib Akhtar and Jonathan Trott. And of course, the upshot of this might be that Shane Watson is going to retire from Test cricket or even cricket, and it seems that he's going to end his career on 40 caps, and I thought he'd at least make 50 before walking off, leaving everyone disappointed. The other thing, of course, is that this is the latest in quite a long line of acrimonious career ends. If you think back to the way Mike Huss's career finished, when after his final test against Sri Lanka, he just wanted to hang out with the backroom staff, and Michael Clarke allegedly wanted him to attend a swanky reception on James Packer's yacht instead. That is now starting to look like the high point of Australia's Ashes preparation, Nishant. And there was an interesting quote today from Mark Waugh, who is a man not unfamiliar with off-field controversies in India. And he said, "It's not schoolboy stuff. It's not under sixes, and there we have to presume he means the player ages rather than their tour batting averages."
And you see, James, although I very much sympathise with Mickey Arthur trying to lay down the law and make Australia a more professional unit, asking players to write an essay to guarantee selection somewhat narrows down the talent pool, as these 4 players have made abundantly clear. I mean, if you think about it, this Australian team has a 25% failure rate before the exam has even been taken. And then you add into the mix the fact that David Warner passed a task that involved writing things down, and you really have to start asking questions about cheating within the Australian side. You look around the Australian team and you think about who might be the brains of the operation, and you look towards the likes of Dave Warner and Steve Smith, and you're thinking, maybe not. And then you look at the likes of Ed Cowan, who probably received a pass after beginning his essay with a Nietzsche quotation. You've got to think, this must be a dream come true for Ed Cowan, because in the nets he could be struggling all the time. He doesn't get a bowl in the nets. All he gets to do is practice his stodgy, dour defence all day in the nets. He could nick behind once or twice. And then all of a sudden, Mickey Arthur asked him to write a bloody essay, and overnight he's become the most popular player in the Australian team, helping out everybody here and there with their homework. And you can just kind of imagine it as a scene from Zoolander with someone like Shane Watson asking Ed Cowan how to spell his own name, and then Mickey Arthur perhaps receiving a handwritten note on a piece of hotel reception paper, perhaps holding Ed Cowan's homework up right next to Shane Watson and thinking, "You didn't write this, did you, Shane?" And then Shane Watson just standing there and in the most solemn sort of way, which we've all been there as school kids, and mumbling under his breath, "I'm sorry, coach, it won't happen again."
But just perhaps a semi-serious point out of all this, and I think it's a shame that Khawaja is involved, because he's a player with, I think, pretty solid technique, and at times looks as if he's got wrists with molten silk running through them, but at the same time has had a few sort of disciplinary problems. There's people who've questioned his attitude, and I think fairly or not, and most people would probably say 99% unfairly, this is now going to add to his record as a bit of a problem child, whereas really Mickey Arthur should be the one going down as the worst parent since Joseph Fritzl. But, Nishant, we might say that Arthur is making Giles Clarke look like Mike Brearley when it comes to man management, But perhaps there is a flip side to all this. If you play for your country, it should be the pinnacle of your career, and you should comply with whatever requests go with that, however trivial they might seem.
Well, to be honest, James, I think Mickey Arthur is getting a lot of stick for this, and to be honest, it's not really all of Mickey Arthur's fault. I mean, he's essentially being ridiculed for meting out this punishment, but in reply to that, I say, if you can't even be bothered to slip 3 sentences underneath the hotel door of your coach, or even have a chat to him over breakfast, it's not as if these Aussies have had that much to do. I mean, if you look at their Twitter feeds, they've been playing golf most of the time between tests. You've got a squad of 17 players, you've got Ed Cowan to copy off, and to be honest, there is no excuse whatsoever to not come up with even 3 sentences. I do agree with Michael Clark and Mickey Arthur on this one. It shows a complete lack of respect for the coach, the captain, and the honour of playing cricket for your country as well. From Mickey Arthur's point of view, it's quite clear that he's inherited this sort of leadership vacuum. They say that Mickey Arthur has come into the Australian job with Australia at their lowest ebb in the last 20-odd years, and it's all the rebuilding process which Mickey Arthur has got to get going right now. And part of my own philosophy is kind of geared towards a Greg Chappell sort of way of thinking, where the focus is more on the process rather than the results. And I think that Mickey Arthur is really trying his best to do the same here. Sadly for him, he's not actually going to make many friends here. And especially as a South African coming into Australia, Mickey Arthur is looking at the longer term here. And I think for that, we have to give him some credit. And the 4 players who were too lazy to even slip a note under their coach's door, you even send them a text, for God's sake, I think it's utterly pathetic, utterly lazy, and it's an insult to Australian cricket, and I do think they deserve to be dropped for this test. It does set a precedent, which I'm sure is exactly what Mickey Arthur is looking to do. Hopefully it yields the results for Australia in the long term. It might not even be under Mickey Arthur's stewardship where these results are seen, but now this group of Australian players know exactly where the boundaries are. They know that they can't take anything for granted. Well, I say they know where the boundaries are. We'll see on Friday, I suppose. They can't take anything for granted, and I'm firmly in Mickey Arthur's camp in this one. Smack my pitch up now, and to Gaul, where Bangladesh and Sri Lanka are currently playing one of the dullest draws of all time, and last week we also saw England play out a dull draw at Dunedin against New Zealand. Both pitches were flatter than a Russian gymnast's chest. In the Sri Lanka match, Bangladesh broke quite a few records, with Mushfiqur Rahim scoring Bangladesh's first ever test double century, and Mohammad Ashraful also scoring 190, which is Bangladesh's second ever highest score. It was the first time that they've had 3 centurions in a single innings. Their total of 638 is the highest ever in tests, and the first time that they topped 600 runs. So James, what do you make of this proliferation of dull as dishwater matches?
It's not been essential viewing, perhaps, and I just found it very strange, the Dunedin pitch, when we think of typical sort of spicy sort of New Zealand wickets, almost England-style wickets, but here the pitch was lifeless, doughy, and a strange sort of orangey brown colour. I imagine it was rather like bowling on Shane Warne's forehead, Nishant, and it was a near superhuman effort of incompetence from England to be bowled out on it in their first innings, batting first, for 167. They did hit back in the second innings, and I would just like to mention Alistair Cook and Compton, who both made tons, and in doing so obviously brought up another century stand. That's their third in 10 innings, which is quite impressive if you look at the context that Cook and Strauss took 28 innings opening together to make their first century stand. Compton probably feels people don't talk enough about his grandfather Dennis, so I just like to point out that he's now joined an elite group of 3 cricketers, along with Ian and Greg Chappell, who followed in the footsteps of their respective grandfathers by scoring a Test 100. Vic Richardson is the Chappell's grand pops, who made 125 at the MCG against England in 1925. But just coming back to that Gaul test match, and as we speak, at the end of the 4th day, we've had so far 1,325 runs for the loss of just 15 wickets. But to be honest, I feel a bit sorry for Bangladesh. They get turned over and everyone says they shouldn't be playing test cricket. They score, as you say, 638, and it's just because the pitch is terrible. On a more positive note, I was strangely elated to see Mohamed Ashraful get a 190. He is a player who could probably quite justifiably be called Rohit Sharma's role model. Since he last scored 100 in 2008, he's made just 1/2 century. So even though this was a pitch where probably the only decision to make was whether it should be buried or cremated, I was still quite pleased to see the enfant terrible of Bangladesh cricket doing quite well.
Well, James, yes, Mohamed Ashraful scored 190 in this test, and Ashraful now has the lowest average for anybody who's scored 5 or more test centuries. He averages 24.1 in test cricket. He has played 58 tests now, and has had a 12-year test career, when, if you consider the careers of many other batsmen, for example, Darren Lehman, Martin Love, even Habibul Bashar, who was Bangladesh's stalwart for so long, he really has outlasted them all, and it is quite an achievement for someone who I like to compare to a broken roulette machine, in that he tends to land on 0 more often than not. And that brings us to the end of another edition of Radio Cricket. Thank you very much once again for joining us. Do catch us on youtube.com/altcricket. If you'd like to download us, then you can get us on soundcloud.com/Radio Cricket, or you can get us on iTunes as well. Just search for Radio Cricket. I've been Nishant Joshi.
And I've been James Marsh.
And on this historic day, it's time to say what Australia have said to their Ashes chances. Goodbye.
I think it was a very poor performance. One of the worst things I have ever seen done on a cricket field. Good night.